Hey you, it's True with a truly quick review of the new Dark Clarice. And aligned to her name, she is of the dark element. She has a speed that is pleasing to the eyes of 468, but I can already tell you that she also has a get turn mechanic, which might be especially interesting at the start of a battle. What can she do when she gets that turn? How about using her first active instant skill called Lethal Plague? One spirit cost to grant one enemy the lethal poison status effect and infects them with it. Infection is a new thing that is not a status effect and cannot be prevented or purified. And after the end of each turn, this infection will trigger to apply lethal poison to a random non-burning, non-lethal poisoned enemy, ending after 3 triggers, if the infected enemy even survives that long. So under the right conditions, this can be a quadruple lethal poison spread over the next few turns after using this. As always, lethal poison can act as an execute against units that can die from poison, which ironically Dark Clarice is not one of them. But yeah, this lasts for 999 time units and usually is not purifiable, only possible to override it with burn or stealth. However, this skill becomes locked for 100 time units after use, quite a long time, and it is also limited to 5 times per battle. Now, if the lethal plague hits just right, then her second active skill that is also instant hits even harder because it is called Throw Knives. It actually gives one spirit and deals 500% damage to one random enemy. However, minus 100% damage for each non-poisoned enemy on the battlefield, which is a super funny way of phrasing this, because so far Sigza would go the other way around and say, okay, 100% base damage and then add 100% for each poisoned enemy, which, as far as my math is concerned, comes out to the exact same thing. So not sure what they want to do with this switch up. Now, while the random enemy part is not ideal, this attack cannot be redirected by Guardians, also ignores damage reduction effects, skin passive skills and counter stance status effect. So this can be very powerful, especially with many enemies being poisoned. It doesn't even quite end there, because the target hit has its poison wards removed, even burn removed, including mega healing burn, and the enemy is then randomly granted either super poison, mega poison or lethal poison, the first two of which deal 4 times or 20 times the damage of normal poison. This skill could seemingly be spammed endlessly, so there is a lock on this one. After 3 times of use within 10 time units, it becomes locked for 50 time units, which will be the point where she then turns on to her next active skills. The next one is Massacre, costs 0 spirit, which is kind of necessary because her first 2 skills might be simultaneously locked and her fourth active skill actually costs spirit. So Massacre might be her only move in some points during the battle. It costs 70 time units, attacks all enemies with 100% damage and adds 100% for each time this skill has already been used while on the battlefield, up to a maximum of 400% total damage. This ignores damage reduction effects, skin passive skills and counter stance status effects, which is definitely nice, but the scaling definitely takes some time to become really worthy of the name Massacre. Even then, it's not an execute skill, but that is where the fourth skill comes into play, which is called Death's Kiss. 2 spirit cost, also 70 time units. This one immediately defeats one non-boss enemy that has 50% or less of max HP, something that she will try to achieve with her throw knives. skill before using this. This cannot be redirected by guardians, but it's only usable if all enemies on the battlefield are poisoned. With all the recovery mists flying around, this is not super easy to achieve, and maybe we get some more poison immunities or wards in future units as well. But her lethal plague should definitely help with that. This skill is only usable 3 times per battle. Unfortunate situations might be where she uses this on conjured units or clones, but if she makes the 3 times count, then this can be super powerful. Moving on to her passives, the first one being called Toxic Maid. Basically, she has a poisonous hold ground, which means if she would be defeated by an attack while there is a poisoned enemy on the battlefield, she will survive with 1 HP remaining instead, but then this will also remove poison from a random poisoned enemy at the end of the turn, including lethal poison. So basically, poisoned enemies are also her life insurance. Dark Clarice also heals for 50% of max HP whenever she damages a poisoned enemy with an attack. A nice little callback to the poison drain mechanics of early dark poison units. And all her attack stats are also increased by 25% each for each poisoned enemy on the battlefield, scaling up to double if there are 4 poisoned enemies on the battlefield. This does not stack with enrage effects, but it is still pretty good given that her attacks also ignore armor, and the throw knives skill could deal up to 1000% damage in that scenario, and the massacre, if she used it often enough, also up to 800% for an attack all skill that ignores armor. That is also a bit crazy. So definitely some potential here if you keep your enemies poisoned. But if you don't, there's also something nice in the second passive, Relentless Killer, because if no enemy is poisoned at the start of an enemy turn, then at the end of that turn this unit will be purified and will have its time units reduced to 0. This effect cannot trigger again until 100 time units advances, minus 20 time units per awakening. So if she is fully awakened, this can still only trigger every 20 time units, but that is an okay time frame, I think. And this is where this plays nicely with her poisoned hold ground, because once she used up all the poison on enemies for staying alive, enemy team basically only has 1 short turn where they can finish her off. Otherwise, she gets the turn, probably will spread some poison again, but only if a lethal plague is unlocked. She also needs to be finished off by damage from an actual attack or execute skill, because she cannot be defeated by damage from poison or burn status effects, which also means she is somewhat immune from dying to lethal poison. She also has perma healing of 10% for each turn any unit takes, and for the first 200 time units she spends on the battlefield, she cannot be burned, reduces the amount of any stun effects against her by 100 time units, and she will also become evasive, ignoring attacks that would exactly target 2 enemies, which is nice, but evasive has seen more powerful days. It feels like we are shifting more towards single target and attack all attacks nowadays, which Dark Clarice cannot ignore. And the ignoring part would be interesting given that she has no armor or stealth feature. Okay, so yet again I think I failed to keep this short. If you have any tips on how I could achieve that, at least for certain reviews, let me know in the comments. But the more extensive battle reviews will of course still stay a thing for most new units. But yeah, let's move on to a brief analysis of Dark Clarice. Definitely more geared towards poison, obviously, but I think she can also work decently well in some hybrid teams, I definitely see her to have much more potential than Dark Kaguya, who was a bit more on the disappointing side for the Dark Poison fans. Dark Ludmilla, however, will still be more universally usable and also more supportive on many teams. That being said, under the right circumstances, the Dark Clarice scaling can get quite ridiculous. A lot to like in terms of her ignoring Guardians with the Throw Knives skill, even though it's a random enemy that might give her the opportunity to kill off with a Death's Kiss some strong units that are hiding behind enemy Storm Anyas. Of course, if she hits Storm Anya, which given that it's a random enemy, there is a chance for that, she becomes disabled and cannot fully utilize her kind of turn order that is built into her skill set. I like that she has a good turn mechanic, especially nice for the start of the battle, I think, when nobody is poisoned, basically meaning she will get her turn rather quickly and then can make good use of all of her instant skills next. But also nice from reinforcements if you wanna switch into poison later on in an arena battalion, for example. Definitely see some burst potential there. However, her not having any armor might be a bit of a struggle, although that can be made up for a bit by barriers. Some concern remains about her removing poison from enemies when she gets put to 1 HP, which might happen more easily given that she has no armor. And while the get turn mechanic, once all the poison on enemies is removed, is rather nice, the problem is that a lot of her skills, like the Lethal Plague, which is kind of her only way of actually applying poison to enemies, are time locked. So she might get a turn but be unable to actually start spreading poison again or throwing knives again, which might only leave her doing a lackluster low damage massacre, or ideally, hopefully at least another Death's Kiss if she hasn't used up all their usages already, which is limited at 3. All that is to say, I think if you run a poison team, I think you should get her. If you run a hybrid team and have a good idea on how and where she could fit in well in your team, then of course go for it as well. But in all other cases, including if you run sleep or burn teams, and even cursed sleep teams more specifically, this one is an easy skip for you. That's it. Like and subscribe if you found this review helpful. I very much appreciate it. Good luck on your summons, and as always, thanks for watching.